Hi, everybody. This is Joel Butterly at InGenius Prep. And today I'm answering one of your questions, which is how do you actually select an application persona? So for those of you who haven't seen our other videos, the application persona is a term that we coined to refer to the theme of an applicant's application. That is to say, if you were to read someone's application and then you had to summarize them in one sentence, the sentence that you would summarize them with is the application persona. An application that tries to do too much or doesn't have a kind of consistent theme to it would not have an application persona. It'd be impossible to summarize it in a sentence. Versus somebody who does have an application persona, you'd be able to say, oh, this is the future environmental rights activist, something along those lines. So it's a theme of an application. The reason that the application persona is so important is that, firstly, it makes you more memorable. If an admissions officer has to read 1,000 to 1,500 applications during an admissions cycle and your application has like 10 different themes to it, it'll be almost impossible for them to remember your application. And then they're not going to like flip back and look at your application again. They just aren't going to, it's not going to stick in their mind. Whereas having a strong theme means that you will likely stick in their mind. They're more likely to remember you, and then therefore they're more likely to kind of pull you out of the pile and advocate for you to be admitted. The other reason is it makes you much more persuasive. So you can kind of think of the application as an argument. It's an argument that you should be admitted and that you should be admitted over other people. For those of you who have done debate, you know that having one really good argument is vastly superior to having 10 very weak arguments. Having an application persona is that one very big argument. It's like, this is my theme, what differentiates me, what makes me special or unique. Not having an application persona is like having 10 different weak arguments. Like, I'm a scholar but not the best, I'm a philanthropist but not the most giving, I am a debater but not the most talented, I'm an athlete but not the most athletic. It's those kinds of students who are really good at a lot of things but not great at anything. They tend to do badly in admissions, and part of the reason is that they lack a persona that they can sort of advance in their application. So once you've decided on an application persona, the application itself sort of tailors itself around that. So you prioritize activities that are related to that application persona on the activities list. You might write about the persona. If you're really interested in public health, you might write about the origin of your interest in public health on your personal statement or on your secondary essays. Not everything in the application needs to be about the persona. I'm not trying to suggest that you should be kind of monotonous in that way. But it should be sufficiently prominent in your application that if I were to read it, I would come away summarizing you in the sentence that you want. And it should be simple, straightforward, and it should highlight what makes you different from other candidates. So if you were really interested in public health and had a bunch of extracurriculars related to it, and you wrote a personal statement about how you became interested in public health, then I would likely read the essay and I would come away saying, okay, well, this is a future leader in public health. And that would be the application persona that you want. So that brings us to the actual question, which is, how do you choose an application persona? And there's kind of two ways of answering this question. So one is if you are not in your application year, and the other is if you are in your application year. So if you're not in your application year, so your grade, let's say grade 8 through grade 11, and by the way, you can definitely, and we often do, start working with students on application personas as early as 8th grade. But at that time, we don't really call it an application persona. What we're really calling it is your passion. So the thing to do is to sample a bunch of different areas, do a lot of interest exploration, find something that you are both good at and that you really like doing, because the key to building an application persona is doing a lot of the thing that is the persona thing. Again, if you're interested in public health, the way that you build that persona is by doing a lot and achieving a lot related to public health. So for a younger student, that's sort of the key. Now, I'd recommend you want to be as specific as possible. So if you say I'm interested in biology and you create an extracurricular profile around biology, the problem is that is one of the most competitive majors. For every school, they're only going to accept a certain number of biology majors. And if they get 2 times as many biology applicants as they do other departments, the acceptance rate for those students who are interested in biology will not be good. That doesn't mean change your interest. It just means be specific. So if you're really interested in evolutionary biology or maybe biochemistry, those are distinct. So be specific. I often tell people, try to be at the level of specificity of a college class rather than a college major, right? So biology is a major, evolutionary biology might be an individual class. So there's probably multiple evolutionary biology classes. So that's how you choose your application persona if you are not in your application year. It is absolutely essential finding the theme of what you are going to do and then building an extracurricular profile around it. It is one of the most valuable things that we do with our students, and it is one of the most effective ways to dramatically magnify the probability that a student gets into a highly selective school. So for example, what we find is that students who start with us in grade 8 or grade 9, on average, somewhere between 80 and 90% of them are getting into a top school. And that's 20-30% higher than the percentage that start with us later, like in grade 11, grade 12. So going to the question of how do you choose an application persona if you are in your application year? So what I recommend is this: sit down with a list of all of your activities, write out what you've done, write out why you liked it or why you didn't like it, write out the parts that you liked, get as much information about each activity down, including like what your motivations were for doing it. Like if you shadowed a doctor and you worked as an EMT, and other medical related things, you want to include what motivated you to do this thing in particular. The next goal is to find as many commonalities or linkages between as many of these activities as possible. So it could be the case that you shadowed a doctor, you did Habitat for Humanity, and maybe you worked at a tech startup that specializes in water filtration or something like that. Well, the common thread here might be that you're really interested in public health, and these are all related to public health. So you're trying to find that common thread. Try to find something that unites at least a couple of your most prominent or your most special extracurricular activities. And once you've found that, that's how you sort of choose the application persona. So in this scenario, your activities and your experiences are dictating the persona rather than you dictating the persona and then doing the activities. So it's a little bit more limiting, but it still works extremely well. And then once you have the persona, you can use that to determine what your personal statement will be about, what the kind of secondary application essays will be about. If you need a letter of recommendation from someone highlighting this persona, I often find that it is good to ask at least one recommender to sort of highlight this persona. This student is going to be a future leader in X or Y or Z. That's incredibly useful as well. Okay, that's how you choose an application persona. Again, this is a term, application persona is a term that we created. There's no part of the application where it says, what's your application persona? It is an important strategic element of the application. And if you start early enough, formulating a application persona will mean that you are likely to build a more impressive and more focused extracurricular profile. Remember that at the end of the day, college admissions for highly selective schools can be distilled somewhat. This is something of an overgeneralization and fairly unnuanced, but is, let's say, 90% accurate. It really boils down to, are you academically qualified, which is grades, test scores, APs, stuff like that? And are you an expert at something? Is there something that you are really special at? And if the answer to those questions is yes, chances are you're going to do well in the admissions process. And if the answer to the question is no, then you probably won't. That's why kids who are really good at a lot of things but not great at anything, even when they have top grades and top scores, don't get into the most competitive schools, and seemingly other students who do not have the same level of credential do get into those top schools. Oftentimes it is because the ones who do get in are experts at something. And most colleges want future leaders. And the best way to find a future leader is find somebody who's already really advanced in their field and sort of a pioneer for their age group. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope this was helpful, and talk to you all very soon.